Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Friday Focus on the 7th of March. My goodness, we're in March already. The year is zipping past very quickly. This is episode 20. So thank you for remaining with us. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, this is the 20th episode of Friday Focus, which we started back in June of 2024. Our fortnightly view of the education world. You know, the reason I called it Friday Focus is that working with head teachers around the country, a lot of people saying it's so busy, so much going on. I just need time to sit and focus on what's important. And a lot of people have been saying Friday's that day, just a chance to end the week with thinking about what's next. So that's the purpose, and that's what we're here for. We're here on LinkedIn Live. We're also broadcasting on YouTube. If you're on either of those channels and you're seeing this for the first time, please do like, share, and subscribe if you're on LinkedIn. We are investigating moving into other podcasting areas, so we're hopefully will be on Substack and Apple podcasts very soon. It'll be the same content. I know we know people are listening rather than just watching, and there are some of you that are here on a Friday. Now, we know our audience is across the world, certainly from the comments and the messages that we're getting back. So welcome from wherever you are and whatever time it is, wherever you are. It's 7:45 or 7:47 here in England. Now, my guest this week is Mark Anderson, the ICT evangelist and global EdTech pioneer. And I'm going to bring him in and welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for inviting me, Chris. I love an opportunity to share. So, good morning to everybody. And if you haven't got a cup of coffee handy, then I apologise for the one that I've got ready here. Now, I'm excited to share, Chris. Thanks for inviting me.
No, real pleasure. And those of us that have followed obviously you're on LinkedIn and you're on other platforms and you post regularly, and it's good to see, being out and about, I think is your expression, isn't it? It's getting out there and doing things. But just Mark, just as we begin, some people won't know you. So just tell us a bit of, my classic start. Tell us your journey to this point. Tell us a bit about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I got into teaching, and I'm a former teacher and school leader. I got into teaching to make a difference. I taught badge classes when I was in the Boys Brigade, when I was a teenager to younger children, and I really enjoyed it. And so I decided.
I didn't know we shared that. I didn't know that we shared that years ago. Yeah, there we go.
There you go. It's funny when you do share that, the number of people who come out and have been through a similar sort of pathway. Sometimes it's Air Cadet, sometimes it's Scout, sometimes it is as well. But it gave me a real sort of buzz for teaching. So I knew straight away I wanted to be a teacher. So I did a BEd and started teaching straight away. And through my career, business and economics was my subject, but as is the case still, even now, there was a shortage of ICT and computing teachers, and the government had just brought out the IT national strategies. And my head teacher said, "Well, look, as someone who teaches business, surely you can use a spreadsheet and a word processor, right?" So I was like, "Of course I can." And so I fell into teaching ICT and then subsequently computing for the sort of 20 plus years of my career, where I was the head of computing, local authority lead teacher for computing, all these sorts of things. Moved up into school leadership, and I led on one of the first iPad one-to-ones in my school in Clevedon in the southwest, and that drew a sort of spotlight. I'd already been sharing a bit on my blog, and it was all about sharing the I love technology, and people say to me, where did the name ICT Evangelist come from? And it was, well, I didn't realize at the time, rather naively, that Mark Anderson was quite a common name. So I thought, what is it you want to do? What is it you want to share? And I've always felt that technology is too expensive and important to leave to chance. And so by sharing some of the good stuff on my blog, inspired by the likes of, Andy Hutt, Tim Rylands, Russell Prue, and others. I started blogging and sharing, the good stuff, as it were, and the bad, because that's often just as helpful. And I came into a position where I was, and I'd done lots of research and action research in role and reading around it and what have you. And we implemented iPads in our school in the Southwest. And I got to a point where I was, I was working really hard. I was out doing extra stuff. I was on leadership, and my children were really young. And I thought, you know what, I'll take a year or two out. And try and support schools and help schools more broadly than just beyond the sort of four walls of my school. And I was always, like I say, I was already going out and doing things with schools. I'd written my first book, The Perfect ICT Every Lesson, which had done really well. My blog was winning awards and things, so people sort of knew of me. And so I handed my notice in January 2015, and so January this year marked my 10th year sort of running my own business. So that has led me to working with schools. I get to speak at events and things like BET and whatnot, and things in other countries of a similar sort of nature. But it's all, for me, always been about sort of sharing good practice, sharing best practice, and helping people and those sort of things. And one of the lovely things that has occurred over the years is that alongside working with schools, school groups, trusts, supporting them with training and sort of digital strategy consultancy, and more recently, good ways to use AI, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, I'm sure. But I've also had that because my thing is sort of teaching and learning with technology. I've had the great fortune to have had the opportunity to work with lots of technology companies as well, from the likes of Apple and Google and Microsoft to where I work part-time now as the head of education at NetSupport as well. So I had a really broad sort of cross spectrum of opportunities, but all in a vehicle of trying to help people. When I'm working with technology companies, it's about again, it depends on what their needs are, but sometimes it's about helping people who aren't teachers know about teaching and what the pressures are. So when they're having a sales conversation, they actually can understand the pressures. Sometimes it's about helping with the copy, the writing on the websites to make it fit for purpose, and making sure that it explains what the products are. Sometimes it's about talking to companies about features the products could have inside to make them more fit for purpose, or better, more useful for teachers in the classroom. The things I share are really, really broad. One company I worked with described me a bit like a Swiss Army knife, in that you can use me for lots and lots of different purposes. But I'm really fortunate, and I was speaking at an event with Planet IT, a sort of Oxford-based partner at NetSupport, with NetSupport actually, yesterday. But it was full of digital leads and network managers. And one of the things that they were talking about was the complexity of having conversations between technical people and teachers, and how often they can sort of butt heads together, and how do you actually manage that conversation? So I do an awful lot of that as well when I'm working with my school clients, trying to build bridges, because often the technology itself, apart from being quite expensive and budgets falling, makes it even more challenging, shall we say, to have digital working within your setting. But often getting the technology right isn't the difficult thing. It's actually change management and working with people and working on relationships and all those sort of things that can be the kicker. But that's how I got to where I am today, and I absolutely love it. No 2 days are the same, and I still get to work with teachers, support teachers, support school leaders, help make a difference in my own way. And I still share lots and lots. Most of my resources, apart from the books that I write, my resources are free normally. I don't even put a little marketing gate on there to capture your email address, all that sort of thing. I don't really engage in that, because I work on the basis that education's a force for good, and there's far more that unites us than divides us, and anything I can do to help, in any way, sort of small way, shape or form, then that's good for me.
I thank you, Mark. That's a really interesting journey. I'm fascinated. I mean, some of the things that you've just said there, that the expense of the equipment, the challenges of the current budgets, how many of us have been around schools, and there's that classic conversation around all of this kit that's bought is still in the boxes in the cupboards. And particularly, I'm thinking there's the BSF period and the early academy builds, lots and lots of technical equipment that really didn't engage with the teaching staff, and it was bought by somebody because it was on a list of things that they need, and then stuck in a cupboard. And some schools I go to they're still in the cupboard in the boxes they were bought in. It's that I'm really interested in that term. You call yourself the ICT evangelist. Spreading the good news of IT and its possibility. How do teachers respond at the moment? How are you finding that now? Compared with the last 10-15 years of change that we've experienced.
It's interesting that you asked that, actually. I think, if I think to my own children, are we nearly there yet when we're on our journey somewhere? If we think about technology as being a journey, you'd think, given, every year at BET we hear about, the latest and greatest, and this is going to solve every problem sort of messaging from some companies. But I genuinely feel like, if you think about like the hype cycle, I think we're really getting to a point where people are starting to, again, thinking about AI, we're moving beyond that sort of inflated sort of view of it, and we're really starting to get into the nitty gritty of what works. Because whilst I sort of call myself the ICT evangelist because I want to share the good stuff, I'm equally a real pragmatist, because you can't, as Dave Leonard I feel bad now. I've forgotten Andy, his counterpart on the Learning Desk podcast. They call the podcast the Learning Desk podcast because Magic Learning Desk doesn't just fly at events on an iPad. There's an awful lot of work that needs to go into making sure that people are able to make these things work. And so, with the advent of AI. And I think I think to a certain extent the pandemic had a hand to play in teachers' confidence and competence. Something I've myself and my co-author Ollie Lewis and I have written an awful lot about in our new book, the EdTech Playbook, is what we call our 5 C's. And the sort of 2 key things that underpin the 5 C's are confidence and competence. Because if you have those 2 things, it gives you cognizance, and so you can then make informed choices about when to or not to use technology. Because sometimes that isn't the best choice. That sort of ties into the TPAC model, the technological, pedagogical, content knowledge framework from Kohler and Mishra. I think the opportunity. Teachers are under so much pressure. They're to call them time poor would be an understatement, right? With the amount of workload and pressure, and so the opportunity that AI brings to the table in terms of reducing workload is absolutely huge. So I think teachers are far more up for things than they might well have used to have been. But the devil is in the detail, and often it's not. There's no silver bullets. It's often hard yards, but it's sometimes as well not sort of what we call sort of sexy things like VR and AR and all these other things. They're nice, but actually, if you think about marginal gains, thinking about sort of Sir David Brailsford work and that of my former colleague Zoe Elder around marginal learning gains, if we can apply simple processes to our thinking and our sort of teaching and learning toolkit, like keyboard shortcuts, little things that you can do to tweak your performance to make you more effective, prompt design, how to write a good prompt using AI, knowing what is possible, what AI is good at and what it's not so good at, then I think we'll be in a really, really good place. So I think teachers are far more up for things than they might have otherwise been. But again, let's say the devil's in the details, and training and time and careful planning and thinking about things. A good place to start is thinking about with CPD stuff isn't necessarily anything to do with technology. The EAF, the Education Endowment Foundation, have got some great guidance on what effective CPD looks like, and so applying that sort of thinking to how you embed and deploy technology across your IT estate and across your school or trust or whatever your organisation is always going to sort of stand you in good stead. But as you're finding, Chris, I can talk for Britain, so I'll let you get a word in edgeways for a minute.
No, I don't know. My style is to listen. I mean, there's lots of things that you've said there about that journey, from my question. And there's so many things that I can ask you. I'd rather, and often you answer the questions before I've asked them. I just think that, we're in this world where people are talking about AI, and there's the balance of the really positive stuff, and then there's the balance of the fearful negative stuff. I mean, I was involved in a conversation on LinkedIn the other day when somebody was basically saying, where's the loss in human interaction when a teacher uses AI to create models of questioning and so on. The child goes away and answers them on AI and sends them back to the teacher, and there's been no human interaction in it whatsoever. And my response is, well, one, that's not the teacher needs to be more skillful about what they're putting in front of the children, and the child needs to be taught how to use it appropriately to then create stuff that they've actually moderated themselves before they send it back as an answer. That's, and again, this is where I would say, is it artificial intelligence or is it augmented intelligence? And that, to me, there's a question of how we approach that. You touched on that. Just at the beginning, give us some examples of good AI that you've seen. And I know you travel the world, and you've been into China, and you've traveled to other areas where you've talked to people about AI. We know that there's a lot of really positive stuff going on in the Middle East, in Dubai and other areas, the UAE. Tell us a little bit about, what you've seen of great use of AI and, kind of how it works in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'll just, before I jump into that and answering that question directly, I'll refer back to something you said a second ago as well, right? So as educators, we know how important metacognition is, right? And from sort of various teaching learning toolkits, we can see the additional progress that children get when they understand how to learn. Yes. I think it's really important, and there's emerging evidence which sort of supports this idea that the more children know how to use technology to support their learning, the better they are. So myself and Ollie Lewis, the co-author in the book, we talk about supporting children with digital cognition, knowing how to use technology well to support their learning. Sometimes that can be something, again, not particularly, modern, but knowing how to use your calendar to map out your revision and space in your practice and these sort of things, or knowing how to, not do what my children do from time to time, which is, take photos of maths problems and then just say, solve this, but how to actually use the tools well. So some good practice I'm seeing is with schools that are taking on board things like Leon Furr's and others' AI assessment scale, recognizing that children are going to be using AI, okay, and in a world where they're going to be using AI, whether you say to them they can't or whether they can, better to champion it in open ways and ways that are transparent. And so the AI assessment scale goes from essentially one end of the spectrum with no AI used at all through to an opportunity where full AI can be used to support, to iterate, to inspire, to write content, to do all sorts, and everywhere sort of in between. And I don't think it's about sort of throwing a baby out of the bathwater. Now, as educators, we have a bunch of analog, strategies that we can use. Sometimes we want our children to be talking in the classroom, to be discussing their learning. Sometimes we want them silent because we want them to really focus on that retrieval and to be answering the questions. Sometimes we want children to be sat apart. Sometimes we do lots of different things. We've got different questioning strategies, cold calling, use of mini whiteboards, all sorts of things. And so by being open and with children, we discussed it. We won't mention any school names or anything, but there's one school in London that a friend of mine works at, and they've been employing a sort of an AI assessment scale with their learners. And what they're finding is that making those cognizant choices, children knowing when it's right to, when it's not to, making sure they cite any AI, just like they'd cite any kind of source from a book, a quote, or anything like that. It's that kind of thing which is really, really good, I think. Some other innovative things I've seen is a few schools in Dubai and Abu Dhabi that are using tools where children can actually use specialized AI chatbots. They're not your sort of big sort of chat GPTs or Geminis or anything like that. They're specific products for children to engage with and do so in a safe way behind sort of walled gardens, because something that we all worry about is data protection, data privacy, GDPR, children's IP, all those sort of things. So any tools that children use or us really should go through a DPIA, a data protection impact assessment. So some of these tools are really useful. But it's interesting, we talk an awful lot about research, Chris, and the companies that make these sort of chatbots talk an awful lot about Bloom's 2 Sigma problem. Bloom did some research which showed that children who have that sort of one-to-one mastery techniques will often achieve, or in his research, it will achieve 2 standard deviations better than children or students who don't, which say all sorts of people, from Mark Zuckerberg to you name it, has been quoting this as being, Salman Khan, quoting this as being the reason why we should be engaging with these different sorts of opportunities for young people through chatbots. But the truth is, it's been debunked. It's always important, I think, to sort of dig deeper behind what you hear AI influencers talking about. Even myself, if you hear me sharing about something, dig beyond what I've shared with you, because often the things we read, things we find, you'll know this yourself, there's often vested interest behind some research as well. I'm happy to share a link to there's a great article which goes through, there's lots of them which have debunked this 2 Sigma stuff, but just being mindful of it. I think at best, any sort of replicator studies have only sort of shown 1 standard deviation, and I think actually, that in itself is really good. But just be mindful about what you hear and what you read and all these sort of things. And part of that comes from knowing your stuff as well. In the EU, they've released the EU AI Act, and in the EU AI Act, it's compulsory for organisations to train their employees around AI literacy. Now, we're not in the UK. We're not subject to those sorts of regulations, but I think actually, that's not bad practice. And so to help with that, I launched, and I've just got a little link up on the screen here. If you could just bring it up, Chris. I created this AI almanac for educators. If you go to that vanity link down the bottom, which I've actually got the wrong vanity link. So if you take it off for a second there, Chris, and I'll put the right one up a second.
Yeah, okay, that's all right. Well, look, while you're typing that, just say if you're typing that, I'm just thinking, I'm going to make the connection with what Mark you've just talked about in terms of that. Yeah. I've talked in lots of places about we don't measure and score everything, but there is an indication to children about where they are on that journey, and it's the kind of novice to expert view. And I'm just thinking about, even as you're talking, the link to Bill Lucas's work, Professor Bill Lucas's work on creativity in schools, because we don't measure creativity, but he's presented a way of measuring from that kind of 5-point scale of a journey of, as a learner, where am I? Am I? And the truth is, there are a lot of teachers in that mode as well. They start at novice. I've never done anything like this before. And that you're making that link to a CPD journey where I can move from, I may not become an expert. I may be needing people like you, Mark, because you're the expert, but I'm somewhere along the journey, and I get to that developing embedding practice it's really helpful. And I'm saying that because I'm really interested to hear that as part of the narrative around teaching young people to use the opportunity and capture the opportunity and evaluate where they are on that journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny.
I'll put it back on screen.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you. Because and so the vanity link is there actually, and what I can actually also do, because I'm pretty handy with tech, I can actually put the vanity link into the chat. As I say that, it's coming back now telling me that it's failed. Hopefully that will work. I'll tell you what I'm going to do then. As soon as that didn't work, I'm going to do it with spaces in, so it doesn't look like a link. The tools are against me today. Maybe that'll work now as a thing in the chat. No, it's getting blocked again. You can see it on the screen. Yeah, bit.ly/AI Almanac 2025. But yeah, link into what you were saying.
Sorry, Mark, with anybody that's listening that wants the detail, we'll check it and put it in the chat afterwards. It's difficult to do it while we're talking, so we'll make sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, linking into what you said, there's some research, and it's interesting you mentioned Bill Lucas. John Hattie, Dylan Willem, and Aaron Hamilton wrote this paper, The Future of AI in Education, 13 Things We Can Do to Minimize the Damage. And they talked in here about, novices, and some of our sort of skills being replaced. I sort of share the warning about what could happen. I use this image to sort of represent that. Okay.
Yep.
We all know and remember Wall-E and that the warnings that sort of brings to us. But one of the things they do in the paper is talk about the potential loss and de-skilling of people. So if you're a novice teacher early to career, there's a very strong chance that actually with AI you could become even more de-skilled. And the reasons are you don't have the sort of machines can perform tasks better than you. They're more experienced. It gives people a limited motivation to learn. So they might not even be able to sort of operate at that deeper level of knowledge. And they don't understand the outputs that they're being given. And so if you're a new to teaching teacher and you haven't, let's say, heard about learning styles being debunked, well, large language models, they've learned from scraping the internet, and lots of outputs from a broad variety of LLMs will insert things around learning styles into the resources they create. Well, that's not right. But if you're a novice teacher and don't know that learning styles aren't a thing, you might think, great, wicked, my resources are sorted, happy days, let's start enjoying our evening, our weekend, whatever it is. But if you haven't got that deeper domain knowledge, then novices are more likely to become to remain novices or become even more de-skilled. Whereas experts who have that domain knowledge become like expert plus with AI. They see big increases in productivity. They've already and the reason why this happens is they've already got deep domain knowledge. They're using AI to extend their already good capabilities. They understand any outputs produced by AI. And they get the chance and opportunity to extend these outputs even further to gain even more from using those tools. And so it's said that they become not just expert, but elite because they ride the machines in this sort of a way. So yeah, I think it ties in really closely to what you're saying there. And people often talk about this being like a calculator moment, right? When calculators first sort of became a thing, they would, I talk about this with Edward Watson from InnoDrive a lot. When the calculator came out, it's the death of maths, all the rest of it. But it wasn't the death of maths at all. All what we did was we learned how to incorporate calculators into the teaching of mathematics. And thinking back to the AI assessment scale, in maths classes now we see, lessons where calculators are allowed, and exams, times when calculators are allowed, and your knowledge of how to use them well is tested, and all those sorts of things. And there's times when they're not allowed. Well, doesn't that then say to us, if we can learn anything from history, shouldn't we actually skill ourselves about when to use AI well and to not use AI as part of our learning journey? It's all about having that domain knowledge, isn't it?
You can't replace that, and I guess that's the work that I'll just take this off the screen for a second. That's this, that's why I kind of prefer the augmented intelligence rather than an artificial, because it's the sense of how we're using it and how intelligent we are with that on that journey. And it's so look, you've talked about what's going on around the world, then you've talked about some of the policy, and again, just we'll champion some of your resources in a second. But you're writing and talking about where do you see England as a separate education domain to the UK? Where do you see England and its journey compared with what's going on elsewhere? I mean, lots of people are lauding what's happening in, as you described, some of the stuff in the Middle East. The opportunities there. I mean, obviously, it's a different framework because there's a lot more independent schools there. Obviously, the Saudi is seen as being a big development place at the moment. China, Japan, so on. They've got very different education systems. Where do you see we are in England compared with? Because that's where we are today. Not that we could be anywhere, but that's where we are. Where do you see the journey?
Well, our current government are talking a good talk. But you see some countries like Estonia recently have made ChatGPT available to all of its students. We've seen big implementations like this sort of thing. We saw it with iPads in LA and what have you. But the devil's in the details, right? I mentioned this before. Without the right training and support, often it's not the technology that's a problem. It's what happens between the laptop and the chair. So what I'm really looking for is for our government to, and I'm hoping that we see something around this in the sort of results of the curriculum review. But if we compare sort of England to like Abu Dhabi this academic year have launched 39 new policies, many of which have digital right through at the core, and it's a statutory requirement that young people are taught these sorts of things. Well, we've got a computing curriculum, but in my work with the BCS, Chartered Institute for IT, on the School and Colleges Committee, we're talking there about how, with the likes of the brilliant Professor Miles Berry, looking at how we can embed AI literacy into the curriculum. But the thing is, if we know this is the journey of travel. I mentioned the EU AI Act before, and how it's a requirement for everyone to be sort of trained in AI literacy. That is not the case here, but just because it isn't the case here doesn't mean to say you shouldn't be doing that and considering that, not just for staff, but for students too. And so, in my experience working in schools with head teachers, there are some head teachers who, use the Ofsted framework, inspection framework, as the North Star. And there are other schools where their vision and values are about not that, but those things are sort of checked off the list, as it were, as virtue of the fact that they've got a strong, broad and balanced curriculum with safeguarding at the heart and all the rest of it as well. And so, whilst there are places around the world which I would say are further down the journey, I think there's an awful lot of appetite for this in the UK. What's needed, I think, is some guidance, which I'm hoping is coming along soon. There are some great organisations feeding into all of this. The Chartered College of Teaching have been talking with like Dr. Kat Scutt and others, Annalise Smith and things at the Chartered College, about how they can inform the DfE about effective ways of implementing tools that work, all these sorts of things. The government are working on the marketplace to sort of share AI tools that sort of meet the requirements. And the hallmarks of sort of what a good one looks like. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Tim. Yeah, absolutely. I know Tim well. I mean, Tim was sharing on LinkedIn yesterday, and this is where I think good heads can make a real difference. Tim was sharing yesterday about student digital leaders on the stage, presenting at an annual conference from his school. Absolutely fantastic to see, a head teacher forward thinking and aligning all of that to their vision and values. Like he said, they're absolutely crucial. So just because things aren't quite there yet doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't be, following those sort of North Stars. But, sometimes I say that implementation isn't the big bells and whistles, it's the hard yards, it's the marginal gains, it's the finding out what works. And sometimes as well, making the most of what you've already got available to you. Many schools will have access to the sort of the basic version of Copilot, for example, through their standard Microsoft installation. So, do your due diligence, do a DPIA on it, and get some training for staff on how they can use that. And as I'll share in a second, there are plenty of resources out there that can help with that.
Yeah. But isn't that true? I mean, you were in business and economics. I started my life in design technology and workshops, and working with BBC computers back in those days of the trackable kind of technology. We were doing sort of CAD and CAM work right back in the early days. I mean, that's sort of 1980, late 1980s. But we didn't wait. Yeah, well, I can do that. You can, but we were at the forefront. The thing I remember at that days is we didn't wait for people to say you can. The opportunity was there, and you took it. You did what you could do, and yes, that meant where I probably was at the beginning of that journey, and forcing things to happen and giving children experiences that they weren't getting elsewhere. Yes, you can beat the living daylights out of a piece of metal on an anvil until you're blue in the face, but actually there were some other things that could be done, and that as well. I'd still talk about those kind of activities, but I think that's you are a resource, and people like yourselves, and what we do very different in Smart Curriculum, but we are out there saying to people, I just thinking of what Tim said. I often sit with heads and have got their vision and values around the wall, so in their study there's Andrew, and works with us, Andrew Fail, will tell you, I sat in his office and they got education for the 21st century and all the things around the room. And I asked him the question. He said, where does that appear in the classroom? How does that actually, how's that lived? What's the lived experience of teachers and children to take that vision? So, Tim, thank you for your comment. Anyone else that's listening there, please do comment, and we will draw your comments in to the conversation. I will just pause to say, look, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. On YouTube, it's the Smart Curriculum Network. If you're there, please do subscribe and share so that others can see the conversations that we've been having. If you're on LinkedIn, again, please share the conversation. Please get involved in the Friday Focus. We're here every fortnight at 7:45 in the morning for an hour's conversation with people like Mark and many others. I think we're booked up to near the summer now, so and please come and join us in the conversations. Mark, Tim is just sharing some more here, so there's a link there. I think that's probably one of the schools that you've been talking about. Is that right?
Tim's school, him and colleagues like Henry Penfold are doing amazing work, not just with Microsoft tools, but if you're not connected with Tim, please do reach out. He's Tim Clark on LinkedIn, Tim Jump Clark on X, and is always sharing really, really useful resources and case studies. A really good case study of how they're using Arbor, for example, there. And one of the things, you're talking about moving forwards and doing things early and things. Historically, being an early adopter had considerable risk, right? And so it's often easier to be a laggard and hold back until others have done it. But actually, think that things move at such pace these days. Actually, having a good professional learning network and having people like yourselves and Tim and Al Kingsley, CEO at NetSupport, where I work, his newsletter on a Saturday morning. If you're looking to find out about the latest thinking around AI, he curates a fantastic, he would say, cornucopia of resources.
Encyclopedia. It's a new encyclopedia every week, is it, of stuff that's valuable and what's out there and what people are thinking. So if you haven't seen it, again, Al Kingsley, follow him and get hold of the newsletter. It's really valuable. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that's all good. But yeah, I mean, if you're worried about things, or if you're on a journey, doing what Tim's doing and going out there and sharing about that journey and asking for help and being a head who says, we're trying this. Has anyone else tried it? How's it going? How's it working? You can work with consultants like me who can help join the dots and all those sort of things, obviously. But I'm doing myself out of work here, Chris. But honestly, a good professional learning network is something that I would hugely advocate for, because the network is definitely more powerful than the node. And I remember back to when I was doing the iPad deployment back in sort of 2012, and I was able to connect with other people doing. It was quite a small community then, but people from around the UK and beyond, were really willing to share not just the good stuff, but the things which weren't working, which again sort of feeds into why I share both sort of sides of things on my website with the resources that I create, because sometimes it's not just about the hey, look at me, my shiny classroom, or whatever it is. It's actually, oh crikey, I had a lesson the other day, it went absolutely pear-shaped, and the reason why it went pear-shaped was this. So if you try this with this particular tool, be mindful of this, and that's so useful.
Absolutely. I mean, all of us have had that moment where you've got the lesson planned and the kit is there, and something happens and well, nothing happens, and the lesson. So what am I going to do? And you've got to have exactly. That's probably the best piece of advice. Have that. Beware of these things and have something up your sleeve. Just not just another worksheet, but that's then you need to have a backup plan.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So look,
sorry, go on, Chris.
I was going to take you into sort of another, your work. Just tell us about some of the resources that you've put together. I know you've got it on a screen. So the sort of things you're saying about building this network and having access to resources and things that are available. Tell us a little bit about the spectrum of things. I've got a couple of other questions I want to ask you about the use of EdTech and AI, but just I think this is a pertinent point to think about some of the things that you are doing. Do you want to put that all back on the screen and then just tell us a little bit about things that you do?
So yeah, I mean, creating a prompt, I think knowing how to create a good prompt is something which is super useful. There are lots of AI sort of wrapper tools. I won't mention any of them by name, but often these tools aren't free. They'll cost you money. But if you've got an in-house LLM like Copilot or Gemini, depending on what sort of ecosystem you are, you don't need a tool to write that lesson plan for you. With the right prompt, you can generate all manner of different sort of resources. And so this little book of generative AI prompts is one of my resources. There's sort of 10 to 15 different subjects in there, with stuff in there from primary up into secondary, and you can access that for free. Again, not behind any sort of like sign up page or anything. There's a vanity link down the bottom.
The QR codes are all there, so press the QR code, and so if you're not used to that, just do it and you'll get to it.
Yeah, fill your boots. If you're a senior leader, I've got a similar resource here. I don't have a vanity link for this one, but again, if you go to my website, ictevangelist.com, and just search for a little book and senior, you'll find that resource there. Or alternatively, you can scan the QR code there. People like Chris did say to me, you should be really publishing these things, Mark. So I did actually make another one for support staff, and I actually self-published this one on Amazon. So unfortunately, this was ticket price, sorry. But yeah, you can scan that one or look for it on Amazon. And it's a similar book to the other ones. And it runs through.
There's no reason why schools can't buy it collectively. So rather than a support member of staff having to go off and pay £5 for a book, buy them centrally and share them within your team. It's there to improve the team. I've often shared that with school leaders. You can provide a resource for everybody if £5 is good return if you're going to get your support staff working and supporting and using this stuff. Sorry, go on again. Go on.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and I'd advocate for that as well, because actually the way that this particular book is broken down is there's like a page of prompts for admin staff, there's a page of prompts for finance staff, there's a page of prompts for different types of support staff, right? With sort of 15 different prompts for each sort of different support staff type. So I definitely advocate for that, but it's framed around this sort of premise here, with what I call my STARE approach to using generative AI. Now, honestly, other people like Dan Fitzpatrick and other people have got these kind of approaches around an acrostic, right, where it sort of spells out a word, but they all have the same sort of hallmarks in that you want to be specific with your language, you want to give it lots to do, make it actionable with lots of different things. Don't just say write me a lesson plan on. Okay, be mindful that you'll have to iterate, and know that giving a role to the AI tool you're using when you're creating it. So let's say you're a physics teacher and you want a resource for physics. Say you're going to create this for me as if you were a physics teacher, and sort of build that in. And you can create prompts that that work in lots and lots of different ways. Sometimes it's about asking for a resource. This is one of these. This is an example prompt from the teacher's book here. Okay. And inside of the little books, I put parentheses so that all you got to do, you can use the prompts for a multitude of purposes. Just change the things in brackets to whatever it is for that particular need you have for that particular activity. But I wanted to share another bit of research because I like my research, and prompt design is really important, like I said, and before, Chris. So some research came out that showed that if you start with a sort of what's called an input approach, an output approach, which would be like, make me a lesson plan, give me some content for my slides, that sort of thing. Whilst you'll see some productivity, you're only likely to only get about 0.2 standard deviations improvements in productivity. Whereas if you start with like an iterate with me or a jumpstart for me approach, you're getting 1 to 1.2 standard deviations improvements in productivity. Now the numbers don't look like much, but if you compare that, graphically, you're getting a big jump in productivity. So if you wanted to read that research for yourself, you can do. There's a vanity link and a QR code there, so you can have a little look at that. But what does that sort of look like in reality? Well, what you really want to try and think about doing there then is working with the AI tool to say, I'm thinking about doing this particular thing. Work with me and ask me questions that will help you to, give me the best output. You're playing the role of X. These are the sorts of things that I'm looking to create, Y, Z, A, B, C. Yeah. And really flesh out a detailed prompt that asks the LLM to work with you rather than just saying, give me a lesson plan for year 6 geography on groins and sea defenses for a 1-hour lesson on a Friday. It's not going to, because it'll output something, but it won't be very good. And that's where when you sort of frame that thinking around to what we were talking about before with the novice and the expert, right? If you're starting with good domain knowledge, you'll know what it outputs isn't very good, so you can still improve it. But it's going to take you more time, so you're going to be less productive if you haven't written a good prompt from the outset. Another thing that I worry about as well is teachers just popping stuff up. One of the things you can do is you can upload PDFs and other resources. You can get it to analyze data for you, which is great for sort of looking at your students' test scores and breaking those down and things. But say data privacy means that you shouldn't really be putting identifiable information onto these sorts of tools. It's important that teachers understand, what they should be doing, where they should be doing it, and so forth and so on. So I created an AI policy template. I did one back in October 23, and I've updated it recently based upon changes to things around the online safety bill and GDPR and all those different things. It's not a copy and paste. Obviously, you do still have to do your sort of due diligence and work and what have you. If you go to, you can either find it by going to my website and just type in AI policy template, or you can use that vanity link there to get yourself there. But I do worry about what I've seen in some schools, which is a bit like Wild West. It's like, teachers have been to a teach meet, someone said, try using this, and then people just start using a tool without going sort of through the sort of due diligence and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
If you're interested, on the 10th of May, I'm doing a free webinar with Toddle on how to develop an AI policy for your school, where I'll be diving into that in more detail. But check my socials. I'll be sharing the link for signing up for that and things in not too distant future. But if you want to have a little play around with that, you're very, very welcome to. And honestly,
Sorry, can I just come back to something you said? I mean, just to re-emphasize for the good teaching practice. Come back to that. The research that you're saying is don't just put a question in your ChatGPT and just to bleed off the one thing. You talked about the iterative approach. that idea of putting it back in and refining it. I've been doing this for a while, and in fact, I listen to. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, the rest is politics, the rest is, the guys on there. So Rory Stewart was talking about using it for some of his own policy work and saying that, he puts it on ChatGPT, then puts it into Gemini, and just to see how each of them, so he's continually refining it, changing it, moving it forward, adding, well, it's missing this or it's missing that. Can you change it? So don't just assume that what you get is the fount of knowledge. You just need to iterate that whole process. So it's really that's a great piece of advice, and it's a good place. Can I just sort of drive us, because we're coming to sort of the end part of our conversation. I don't want to miss. You referred to it right at the beginning, Mark, about this, the pandemic period and the kind of change to a lot of online learning. I've been working with a number of schools that said, look, during that period when there was a lot of online learning, a lot of the disenfranchised and disengaged children suddenly switched on. Actually, I worked with a school that said that we got children that went from no engagement at all to 100% engagement during the pandemic period because they were involved. And there's a question about inclusion. Now, we know about screen time concerns, and we know about all of the it's not just this little box in front of us. Where do you see, and just in a sort of if it's possible in a quick response, because a lot of what we talk about here is kind of focused on inclusion. Where do you see the spectrum? This isn't just for the brightest children in the classroom, and it's not a substitute for teaching assistants or an adaptive program. What's your comment on sort of inclusion practice as it relates to AI and this whole domain?
Well, there's a quote from I think it's a quote from him, Dr. Ruben Puentedura, who created the SAMR model, right? And he said that technology gives us the opportunity to do things that wouldn't be possible without the technology, and that's that sort of redefinition level within the SAMR framework. And so that's kind of one of the things which really has been a bit of a North Star for me. SAMR isn't a ladder by any stretch, right? Substitution activities are just as important and often can give bigger gains when you aggregate them than a whole load of stuff at redefinition. But when you're able to use, like, think about there's a tool from Microsoft called Reading Progress. Okay, now primary school teachers are time poor, like all teachers, right? But how often do they get a chance to sit down and listen to every child in their class read? Not very often. But with Reading Progress, you can open up a Teams assignment and set a piece of reading for your children to read through, set at a level which is tailored to them, using your knowledge of them as students, as pupils, and their Lexile reading level. They sit down at their device, they read it, and the AI, looks at their fluency, their proficiency, their pronunciation, all these different things, and feeds that information back to staff. When I talk computing, I would share that data is meaningless until it's been given context, and then it becomes information. Well, the AI tool does that. It listens to every child. Sorry, I've just seen something you typed there and it's thrown me for a second. The tool will listen to what every child's reading. It'll give the teacher feedback on how well children have done. It will group together children who've got specific problems with specific things. And if you use Reading Coach, rather than you having to go back and coach those children with those things, the AI tool can do that as well, right? And using tools to help will, in this sort of a way, will be really, really useful. Something else I talk about around with all of this, right? And inclusion and accessibility tools are as Paddy McGrath from Everway, formerly Text Help, shares. Technology such as these tools are essential for some, but useful for all. And that ties into this idea of universal design for learning. I've seen Wendy said you can't see my screen share. It might be because I've turned something. You've turned it off. Is that right, Chris? I've
taken it. We're not sharing on the screen at the moment, but when we were sharing, it would appear that it's not showing on YouTube. I've just said we'll share the details afterwards. And apologies, because these are coming from Mark's screen rather than from my screen. But we can share the details later. But apologies.
Waving to Wendy there. Yeah, I'm sharing. I've got it up here, but you can find it through the details afterwards, and we'll have a look on my my LinkedIn. I shared an infographic with tech enhanced universal design for learning for inclusive classrooms, and so there are sort of three in this here sort of domains where technology can help. So, sort of removing barriers. So if a child or a student sort of struggles with focus, then there are tools you can use to help focus them. This is it here, look. So hopefully this will work. I'll zoom in a little bit. So it could be, if you've got an iPad, you can use guided access. If you've got a Windows or other environment, you can use it like a tool from NetSupport called Classroom.cloud. You can use animations in PowerPoint to stagger things. So rather than putting all the information on the screen in one fell swoop, you can do that through animations. I'm not going to sit here and read through all of these, but there are so many ways in which you can support learners and be inclusive in the classroom. But I will highlight one particular tool which I absolutely love, and you can see it appearing a few times on here. You've got Goblin.tools. Goblin.tools is a website where you can use their task manager tool for those students who struggle to know how to access activities, whether it's writing an essay or Romeo and Juliet, or designing a bird feeder for one of your classes, let's say, Chris, a classic one from sort of year 8. Right. If you're struggling, you can use Goblin.tools to break down those really, really difficult tasks designed for neurodivergent students. But I think Goblin.tools really does tick that essential for some, but helpful for all things. It really helps break those things down. That resource is available on my LinkedIn and my website, and it's just there as a prompt really to get you thinking about A, what's possible, and then B, the tools that you can use to help across those different kind of domains of marginal gains or the challenges children are facing, and so forth and so on.
And you're illustrating again the power of networking and the power of having in your tool bag people and resources who've been there, done it, tried it, played with it, learned the lessons of what doesn't work and what does work. And so there's nothing more we could say in this than just get out there and share your ideas and listen, because it's where you pick up the skills. Those of us that the white hair comes from somewhere, Mark. So, been doing this for a little while, but that's fine. It's it's just part of the journey, isn't it? It's it's that there's nothing more powerful than watching and seeing. I mean, we back in the noughties, the peer pair profiling, which was a mechanism we used in schools. Getting people to look at each other's activities. Oh yeah, that's great, I'll try that. Or yeah, okay, I'm not going to do that in my classroom now. I can see it. It's that networking is so powerful.
No, absolutely.
And Mark, we've got sort of 5 minutes. I just I usually end with the question of I in a sense I've kind of led people into what can you do to increase your network. But if you could change one thing in the perception of EdTech and AI, where would you concentrate? What would you be saying to school leaders and teachers?
You'll be aware of the Mark Prensky thing of where he talked about sort of young people being digital natives versus sort of digital immigrants. I mean, he laterally went on to say, I don't know why I said that. There's no such thing as a digital native, right? But what young people do have, and I've seen this in my own children throughout their various years. In fact, my eldest 16th birthday on Monday. I can't believe the time has flown as quickly as it has, right? But I've seen them even from a young age wanting to touch screens and things, having using touch screens and then going to a device where there isn't a touch screen, but then touching the screen. They're far more compared to like my mum, who still tries to text me and then rings me at like 11 o'clock at night when she's just trying to text me, right? What channel is Netflix on? These sorts of things, right? Yep. And when you've got that sort of thing there, I think the thing we can learn is that becoming competent and successful with technology doesn't have to be difficult. You can start small and then grow big. You'll know at a very simple level, Chris, things like Control-C, Control-V can transform, productivity just with those two little simple things there. But so imagine if you learn, what would the world be like if you learned 3 or 4 more keyboard shortcuts? So don't be afraid to try things and just share that, because the more you can raise the confidence and competence of teachers in their use of technology, they have better cognizance of where things are, and so you sort of raise that sort of bar higher and higher and higher and higher. So yeah, give technology a go. I know it can be scary, okay, but you're not going to break it, and if you do break it, well then there's people, you know, who could help you to fix it, right? It's the benefits often far outweigh any concerns you might have around that sort of thing. So try and if you're a leader, try and do whatever you can to, you know, promote a culture of risk taking. You know, teachers aren't going to start throwing chairs at children. It's not that sort of risk. You know, but if you promote a culture of risk taking, people will try things out and make it so that and model it yourself. You know, some of the best head teachers, a former head teacher of mine now, he's retired now, but John Wells, you know, I'd work with him and support him, you know, with things that were in a Haynes manual world, like a one spanner kind of activity. But some people need that. So scaffold and work with colleagues in a similar way as you might do with you know, teaching with teachers. So we know how to teach people. So use that and promote that culture where people can try things out and there's no wrong answers.
That's a brilliant way to end our conversation. You know, just give it a go. Don't be frightened of it, and don't listen to the myths. Check out. I mean, a lot of, Mark, what you've said is, you know, is research informed. It's good, you know, peer judged material that is being tested and proved. So, you know, read the material, understand the context, but don't be afraid to innovate. Just have the confidence. I mean, you know, at trust level kind of conversations, I know, you know, can share with colleagues. You know, if there's lots being talked about the sort of the risk, your risk appetite, your risk management. You know, so be aware of all of the known challenges to what you're doing. Don't be foolish, but don't stop the chance to innovate, because it's, you know, it's exciting for learners and for staff. You know, I remember that journey as a subject leader. You know, quick wins by just, you know, making things easier and reducing workload and you know. Mark, I really appreciate the conversation this morning. It would appear on YouTube we've had some issues with sharing the screen, but we'll make sure that people can see, certainly in terms of recording here, we'll make sure that people can see that, and we'll share links on posts following. I really appreciate you joining me this morning, Mark, and thanks for the conversation, and long may it continue, the journey.
No, thank you ever so much for having me, Chris. It's been a real pleasure. I'm mindful we're over time, so I'll just say hi, Wendy, and thanks to you, Chris, for asking me to come on and share a bit today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you, and we'll finish there, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time with another subject and another guest. So thank you, and all the best for the weekend. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.